cell transplantation, much better than these earlier non-specific treatment strategies, and it has further improved between 1997 and 2004. Here is imatinib as single treatment between 2002 and still going on. The 5-year survival is greater than 90%. Look at the difference between imatinib and earlier treatments. This is a huge success, that's why you call it a revolution. Then I go to the next example of acute myeloid leukemia, as I have discussed briefly before. 30% of the patients have mutations in a kinase called FLT3. It's a receptor. It binds to a ligand called FLT3 on the surface of the cell. Then all the signaling we have discussed before were activated, leading to the survival of myeloid cells, leading to acute myeloid leukemia. Here is the structure of the protein. Extracellular part binds ligand and a duplication of syndrome. A protein called JAK2 kinase is very important for signaling from erythropoietin receptor. Once erythropoietin receptor binds erythropoietin ligand, it dimerizes, which will then activate a JAK kinase. JAK2 is a kinase that binds to receptor. Then it will activate downstream signaling pathways that are important to tell the cell to divide or to survive. In myeloid dysplastic syndromes, a mutation in JAK2 was reported. V617F is the mutation. It is reported in nearly 98% of patients with polycythemia vera, nearly 50% of erythrothrombosis, and nearly 50% of myelofibrosis. So you know, a mutation in a protein that is well characterized before as a good signaling molecule. Then various inhibitors were developed and tested. Here is the survival advantage with Jakavi, which is a targeted agent for JAK2, resulting in nearly 42% reduction in the risk of death in these patients that carry JAK2 V617F mutation. Coming to fourth example, systemic mastocytosis. Here, the molecule involved is c-KIT. It's a protein. Here is the membrane. This is extracellular part that binds the ligand. Here is the intracellular part with kinase domain, that is enzyme. So mutations were reported in entire protein, but specifically in systemic mastocytosis, a mutation called D816V is more prominent. So, as you have seen before with CML, AML, MDS, the survival of systemic mastocytosis without progression is significantly enhanced with the introduction of Gleevec. As you remember, Gleevec is a ABL inhibitor. This is the beauty here. Later it was identified that c-KIT is also very similar to ABL kinase. So people thought it is possible that we target this KIT kinase also with imatinib. Remarkably, the enzymatic activity of another enzyme can also be inhibited by the ABL inhibitor inhibition. This is called drug repurposing. It was already approved and used for a particular disease. Now you are testing it for another indication where it may also have effect, resulting in a huge survival advantage in a different disease, which is caused by a different protein. But the story is not that smooth. A significant proportion of patients relapsed after treatment for certain amount of time. Here starts the problem. The cancer comes back. We have briefly discussed about melanoma in case of RAF inhibitor or vemurafenib, but here we will discuss a bit more. Why? The major cause is that the imatinib, the inhibitor, or any chemical needs to bind to interact with certain amino acid residues at the active site to be stabilized and inhibit the activity of the enzyme. Cancer is also smart. Certain mutations are developed within this active site. This is the region which binds imatinib, which needs to interact with the drug. These interacting amino acid residues are mutated so that it can't bind the drug anymore, but it can still bind the ATP. So because of mutation, the activity is retained, the kinase activity or the enzyme activity is retained, but the efficacy of drug is lost. So the disease comes back because the drug can't bind the target anymore. This is a big problem. A significant proportion of patients relapse. Of course, there is a discussion whether these mutations were developed later or these are pre-existing mutations which were selected when imatinib was treated. But whatever is the reason, mutations come up which will cause resistance to imatinib treatment. What to do? Another reason. In certain patients, this BCR-ABL part is amplified, the target is amplified. So the drug dose you give is not enough to inhibit all the enzymes which are present in the cell. Of course, there, dose escalation may work, but only to a certain extent, because you can't go beyond certain limit, because there is a toxicity beyond certain amount of treatment, right? And there is another resistance mechanism where certain proteins called P-glycoproteins which will efflux the drug out of the cell. So the drug is not available for the target. The target can bind the enzyme inhibitor, but because these pumps, P-glycoproteins are kicking the drug out of the cell, it is no more available for the target. So these cells also suffer. So these are different resistance mechanisms which cause relapse of these CML patients who are on imatinib treatment for a certain period of time. It is not just restricted to BCR-ABL or imatinib. In almost all the examples where targeted therapy was used, you are now seeing resistance. Of course, the frequency changes, but the good side is that the survival benefit is there at least for a fraction of patients. So what happened now is alternate inhibitors that block ABL kinase were developed. Here are the examples: nilotinib, dasatinib, bosutinib, ponatinib, and so on. What these drugs do is they will bind a bit differently than that of imatinib. So the mutations that abrogate the binding of imatinib can still bind to the second generation, third generation, next generation inhibitors. That is the trick, because their binding mode is different. But not all mutations can be overcome with the next generation inhibitors. But a good spectrum of mutations which cause resistance can be blocked by inhibitors such as dasatinib, nilotinib, bosutinib, and more recently, almost all the mutations were blocked by ponatinib. So, development of new inhibitors could overcome drug resistance against first generation inhibitors. Here is one example I show. These are all those that were relapsed upon treatment with imatinib or dasatinib and so on. Here is the orange line, which is for bosutinib treatment, a third generation inhibitor where a significant survival benefit is there, but we also know there are mutations that are resistant to this inhibitor also. Maybe with time, these mutations also show up in cancer patients. So the story is evolving, it's not over. How personalized medicine shaped the success of EGFR kinase inhibitor. To know this is very important. EGFR was first identified to be causative agent in many cancers, was done way back in early 80s. It is one of the first identified oncogene, the protein that causes cancer. Then on, many pharmaceutical companies focused on developing agents that may target the cancers that express EGFR. People don't know that there are mutations in EGFR. They know they are overexpressed, they cause cancer is new. So they started developing. And there were many clinical trials with no survival benefit. Terrible results. Billions of money spent. You clearly know, proof of principle, that EGFR is causing cancer. But targeting EGFR, you are not getting any survival advantage. Terrible, right? In 2004, Thomas Lynch at Harvard did a remarkable thing. He found that few patients who were treated with EGFR inhibitor called gefitinib, which is marketed as Iressa, have remarkable advantage. The nodes in lung cancer were lost within no period of time. Then he asked the question of non-small cell lung cancer. So as you see, the wild type EGFR also signals that causes the uncontrolled cell proliferation. But the 10 minutes, last 10 minutes, let's rush now. Mutations were reported, I see many happy faces now. Mutations were reported throughout the kinase. We talked about only one point mutation which bound to the inhibitor with higher affinity. But then there are a flurry of studies which reported many more mutations throughout the EGFR kinase. Then doctors were just saying that mutation is a predictable marker for treatment. No. You have to characterize these mutations. Not all mutations may sensitize to drug treatment. One of the studies we also did is, we cloned all these mutations and we found that they have different biochemical activities and they also bind inhibitors with different affinities. So we come to a conclusion that not all mutations are equal. It is becoming even more personalized. We are not talking in terms of unmutated or mutated cancers, but cancers with particular mutations that are sensitive while others are not. There is a difference. That is what is individualization. Here are the examples of some inhibitors. I will rush a bit. So these are different drug sensitivity profiles. As I said just now, these mutations which are shown here are sensitive to EGFR inhibitor treatment, and all the mutations that are, of course, present with less frequency are resistant to EGFR inhibitor treatment. This is called primary resistance. But secondary resistance also happens here. All these mutations which are green, that are very sensitive to EGFR inhibitor treatment, nearly 50% of them, almost 50% of them develop a secondary mutation. T790M is the culprit. This is the secondary mutation that was developed in lung cancer, which causes resistance and eventually relapse of these cancer patients that were treated with either gefitinib or Iressa, and erlotinib or Tarceva, both are reversible inhibitors of EGFR. So, more data regarding patient survival. Here is the survival with chemotherapy and huge advantage with gefitinib or Iressa. Now the first line treatment option for non-small cell cancer. And again, between EGFR mutated and EGFR wild type, there is a huge difference. Only when you stratify these patients you will see the significance of this treatment. And again, sometimes EGFR treatment results in a side effect, a skin rash. This you can say side effect, but this also served as a surrogate marker that which patients respond to EGFR treatment and which won't. So the dose that is required to regress the cancer also causes a rash. So rash is a surrogate indicator for efficacy of EGFR inhibitor treatment. So this is the difference between rash present and rash absent patients. So as I said, nearly 40% of the patients also develop resistance because of other alterations, also genetic, and 50 to 60% develop a secondary mutation T790M, which will block the binding of EGFR inhibitor to the kinase. To overcome this, again, next generation inhibitors of EGFR were developed. Afatinib is one example. It is not an irreversible inhibitor, but not a reversible one like gefitinib or erlotinib. It's an irreversible inhibitor. It covalently binds, it won't drop off the enzyme. So it is more efficacious, and here is the difference between survival rate of afatinib and chemotherapy of patients who are already relapsed with a mutation. Apart from small molecule inhibitors, there are also antibodies like which we have described before, which will block the dimerization of the inhibitor, and this is also an example for targeted therapy. Cetuximab or Erbutux is the first monoclonal humanized antibody that was approved for the treatment of non-small cell lung cancer. Again, there are biomarkers that represent the efficacy of this antibody treatment, and again, there is also resistance developing upon antibody treatment, and now it is because of a mutation in the extracellular binding region which blocks the binding of the antibody. So we have to deal with this menace. We must almost always expect that resistance is going to come up and devise some strategies well in advance, at least in the preclinical stage, so that it can be tested when resistance is arising. So EMLA4ALK is another fusion gene which we have discussed already, which is targeted by crizotinib, which also inhibits full-length ALK protein or NPM-ALK, and here is the survival advantage with crizotinib over crizotinib naive patients. And secondary mutations are again found in crizotinib resistant patients, as the story always goes on. So in case of breast cancer, HER2 is the culprit. There are small molecular inhibitors like lapatinib. TICKERB is the marketing name. Lapatinib is a dual inhibitor of both EGFR and ERBB2. And there are antibodies like cetuximab we have described before. Here it is trastuzumab, we have discussed already, and pertuzumab, which can block the dimerization of the ERBB2 and is one of the first agents developed to approved for breast cancer treatment. But as we discussed, the median survival rate is not much here, so it is always now used together with chemotherapy and adjuvant therapy. And this also time constraints. I have limited. Otherwise, we wanted to include dentistry part. We also want to include metabolic disorders, neurodegenerative disorders. But let's have some limited take-home messages, and then maybe next time you can also find on your own. This is the only reason why I limited to cancer. More questions? I know it's a very terrible thing. We have a couple of friends who suffer a lot. But so far I have not seen any targets or something. I even don't know molecular mechanism if they exist or not. So I'm sorry regarding that. Called oncogene switching. Even when there are limited targets, upon prolonged treatment, the target is shifting. So one has to identify it. From time to time, whenever the patient is relapsed, you have to see what is happening, what new thing is activated, and try to bring that agent. Or to avoid that, you may go for an aggressive treatment. So you kill it, not manageable doses, a bit higher or in combination, so that resistance won't arise. Another important thing is, cancer is a multifactorial disease. Even though